Energy uncertainty should accelerate the deployment of small nuclear plants in the EU. While keeping due attention on contingency scenarios, my approach to teaching and research in economics and economic geopolitics is to identify forward-looking conditions, feed forward, that allow the future to feed back into the present, generating financial confidence. The energy uncertainty caused by the conflict in the Gulf makes the need to free the EU from dependence on imported fossil fuels even clearer. This is why the recent decision by the European Commission to finally give priority to new generation nuclear energy is the right one in terms of building confidence for the EU over a 20 to 25-year horizon. A process that should be accelerated. 3 objectives that can be aligned. A. Freeing the EU from oil and gas imports and from the associated excess economic costs. B. Restoring convergence, after a period of deindustrializing divergence, between climate change adaptation and industry. C. Technological futurization with a broad, system-wide expansionary impact. These objectives can be achieved using technologies that already exist or are in an advanced stage of development. Their implementation will necessarily be gradual, which means a transition period is required in which the energy mix will continue to rely, though with a declining dependence, on fossil sources as they are progressively replaced by new ones. The installation of small nuclear plants, 2 hectares, using intrinsic safety fission technology can be accelerated by the fact that they can be built in series. However, deploying them in thousands of locations requires the creation of new, specific regulations to define their governance. The timeline for these regulations should be sped up. At the moment, regulatory authority in this field lies with individual nations, and there is no EU-level obligation to launch new generation nuclear programs. The best scenario, however, would be for the EU to set broad, common macro standards while still leaving room for competition among different technological and national projects. In the longer term, nuclear fusion, requiring larger facilities, also lies ahead, and its spatial planning should be prepared within a compatible timeframe, even though its practical implementation will take longer than that of small fission-based nuclear plants. A very important form of feedback from the future to the present concerns the decarbonization scenario. If we increase the likelihood that by around 2050 there will be abundant clean nuclear energy, combined with solar, hydroelectric, wind, and other sources, then it becomes possible today to reduce the costs and constraints placed on carbon-intensive systems during the energy transition. This would both minimize those costs and give companies the financial breathing room they need to adapt to a post-fossil environment. Will 20 to 25 years be enough? A large amount of low-cost energy will be needed for eco-adaptation and for the new electronic networks that drive productivity, climate control, desalination plants, robotics, networks for the next internet, for artificial intelligence, and so on. For this reason, the future scenario of higher energy demand must determine the pace of the transition toward greater nuclear supply. Political and financial investment should be concentrated on this scenario, which I would call the Fermi project.